Hello everyone, welcome back to Soft Edges. This is our 7th episode. I am Moïse Roucal, and with my dearest co-host Lucy Gerard, we will dive back into pleasure activism, the politics of feeling good by Adrian Marie Brown. Specifically the entire section 4, titled The Politics of Radical Drug Use. Wow, Lucy, this one is hefty indeed.
It is.
Drugs, criminalization, incarceration, racism. I mean, it's a very important conversation, a very confronting one, infuriating one. How are you feeling? Are you ready for this?
I think I'm ready. I have tons of notes, and I think it's going to be an incredibly interesting conversation to have the both of us, but also for our listeners to dive into as well.
I hope so. I feel that way too. And before we begin, of course, an obvious trigger warning this time for our listeners. There will be discussions of drug use in this episode, as well as discussions of terrible realities of racial criminalization. So if you decide not to go on listening this one, we hope to have you with us on episode 8, where we will discuss the next chapter, Pleasure as Political Practice, which will also be awesome. And for the ones who will go on with us, well, I'm excited. Shall we just dive into it, Lucy?
Let's do it.
Okay, so in this chapter, the wonderful divine goddess Adrienne Marie Brown touches on her personal experience with weed and ecstasy, and she interviews Monique Tula, the executive director of the National Harm Reduction Coalition. And this chapter aims to highlight a harm reductionist approach to drug use, enabling a healthy, connected, adventurous and open spirit while maintaining safety and being free of repression, which is something that often leads to overuse, overdose and incarceration. So I think it's pity that Brown almost included mushrooms as a detox for the spirit, but decided not to do it after all. But I mean, I listened to Adrienne Marie Brown talk about mushrooms a lot of times during her Instagram lives and podcasts, and also in her Instagram posts. She loves mushrooms, and she has wonderful stories and facts to tell about them.
Ooh, I bet.
So it's not difficult to find them online. So even if it's not in this book, that's fine. Just go out there and look for it, because she has gold to offer about mushrooms, seriously.
Wow, I'm so curious because I personally love mushrooms as well. I absolutely love it. I had wonderful trips on magic mushrooms, as well as really intense experiences. So I'm really, really excited to listen to her talk about it, actually, and kind of compare our experiences.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I loved witnessing or hearing about your experiences with mushrooms. But I also have witnessed friends who had a terrible time with it. You were also there in one of them.
We're laughing. This is so rude. We're laughing.
I'm sorry. She's a really good friend we're talking about. It's just not a random person we're making fun of. We love her. She's listening to us probably right now, and we love you, baby. We're sorry you went through that shit that day. It's just remembering it is kind of making me giggle, but
it was so
in all
terrible.
the wrong ways, of course. It was really terrible. It's actually not funny. I don't know why you're laughing, Lucy.
Because I'm an awful person, Myers. But I remember that we were both sober at the time, and two of our best friends took shrooms that afternoon. It was a beautiful sunny afternoon in summer, pre-corona times, in a park. It was wonderful. But unfortunately for her, it went south really quickly. And it felt so bad to witness that. Oh my God.
Absolutely. That's really true.
So
we
that's
tried to help, but
her.
there was almost nothing for us to do at that moment. It was really intense.
No.
Yeah, it happens. That kind of experiences also happen. But I guess we will get to that as well. It connects to other things. Broader things, broader systems, broader experiences that are not always personal, but also political, also systematic. So we will all get to that as well. Shall we start with the first chapter of this section?
Absolutely.
Okay, here we go. So this first chapter of the section is titled Weed On, Weed Off, which Brown began writing while she was high, actually. And getting high for Brown is what she calls a cheap way to slow down, to focus on the immediate but also relief from physical and emotional pain, and the source of spiritual experiences of awakening and connectedness. It's a beautiful description of this experience.
I think so too.
That she offers.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
She goes back and forth and as she usually does, when she handles a topic with all of its dimensions, with her brilliant Virgo perception, as always. So she talks a bit about how awesome getting high is for her, but also how she tries to make sure that she doesn't numb herself and miss out on the lessons that come with pain and heartache. So this is kind of an expansion to her definition of moderation, I feel, that she talked about right at the beginning of the book, actually, right?
That's true. Yeah, that's very true.
So, how was it for you to read about these experiences Brown mentioned in this part?
It was wonderful. Honestly, it felt incredibly refreshing to read someone talk about drugs and in this particular case, weed, with such candor. I feel like we more often hear about the horror stories of drugs, the quote-unquote dark side of it, which undeniably exists, of course. However, we hear much less of the benefits of it, the balance that can be found in their use, as well as the many and various reasons behind the consumption of it. As Brown says herself, and as you mentioned already, getting high can be a cheap way to slow down, to focus, and it can be medicine as well as many other things. And I like how she uses the term, quotes, softening the impact of a wounded world in long tantrum.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful way to approach it, right? I feel like it's such a spot on yet refreshing way of talking about it. And I agree, and I would say that escapism, when needed, when craved, is a valid reason, and weed can be a beautiful gateway to it.
Yeah.
I feel like these days, particularly, offering yourself a pause by lighting up a joint at your window, on your couch with a hot cup of tea and a good Netflix series could be a worthy alternative to what you'd actually rather be doing, considering that right now, as we speak, physical travel, even close by, is highly advised against these days, or even forbidden in some countries, and therefore it's not really an option, right? So maybe mind, spiritual, and or emotional travel can soothe one's currently unavailable and unattainable cravings, right?
Yes, so true. Wow.
Yeah.
Even imagining that felt really good now.
Right?
Yeah. Actually, Brown also mentions certain uses of that as well. She says that she sometimes steps back from weed when she begins working on a non-fiction piece for writing, for which she wants to be more reality-based, more grounded. But she often gets high for brainstorming for fiction writing, for to help with her imagination, with her dreams and magic. And actually, I'm curious, Lissy, like, do you have a go-to substance that puts you in a certain mood or a certain function that you can utilize for a specific purpose like this, like the one Brown mentioned?
Yeah, for creation, for example, I used to write when I was high, when I was smoking weed. I'm not a weed smoker anymore, although I'm not opposed to it. But yeah, I did used to get high on weed and just write some crazy shit.
Yeah.
Often it was more like diary entries that turned into short stories and really nonsensical texts, which I loved.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I mean, sometimes when I used to get home drunk from a party or from a gathering with you and other friends, I would sit in my bed and I would have like the best ideas. I would start having what I believed to be the best ideas ever.
Yeah.
And I would start writing crazy notes and maybe even text about it. But the next day I would read them again and I would be like, what the fuck were you thinking? This makes zero sense.
I love
But
your
that
high
feeling,
inspiration. I love it.
I mean, it's a feeling like no other, honestly, because when you get that wave of inspiration and you're like, I'm a fucking genius.
Yeah. Oh my god. That's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, and when I'm sober, I'm like, you are a fucking idiot. What about you, actually? Do you have any substance that you used as fuel for certain things? Maybe creation, maybe something else, maybe working out, or whatever it might be.
I mean, honestly, for me, I think it might be sugar. It's a substance that, a little something sweet gives me a bit of a joy and it elevates my focus. But it can also get very difficult to moderate it, especially if I decide to use it for things that require a longer focus. So then I might lose total moderation on it and consume way more than I should have to remain feeling good, you know, and then I would feel bad, both emotionally and physically. So it's a love-hate relationship with me and sugar. It's a difficult relationship.
Yeah.
It's a pain relief for me, emotional pain relief also. But then too much of it is definitely not helpful too. So I have this strange relationship with sugar. Yeah,
Yeah.
something that I'm trying to get to know better and trying to work through and make it feel better and integrate into my life in a healthier way somehow. But it's been a lifelong project and it still goes on, so that's what it
Yeah,
is
of
for me.
course. But that's a really interesting take because I don't think people often think of sugar as a substance that can cause either issues or wonderful things as
Yeah.
well. We think most often of the more traditional, quote unquote, traditional drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. Sugar high is real, not only like a boost of physical energy, but also in the mood as well. When I feel down, I feel like, okay, fuck it, I want whatever's sweet in my mouth right now, just so that I can get past this. Or sometimes when I feel good, it's like, okay, wouldn't be a boost of sugar make it even better right now, you know? It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
something. It's something to deal with. So yeah, it is tricky. It is a substance. It
For
has
sure.
its use. It has its good uses. It has its bad sides. Yeah. Well. All right, but back to weed. Adrian makes a statement here saying, quote, "I believe the worst harm that comes from smoking weed is prison." End quote. And I agree with that. The impact of this criminalization of weed, the impact of war on drugs is immense on black people and people of color and their communities. It destroys their lives, their futures. And I really also like that Brown states this concern over who profits from the legalization of weed.
Yeah.
And that's a very extremely important point, I feel, as well, as we later find out that it's mostly white wealthy men who cash in on this evil system.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, nowadays in the US, cannabis is legal for adults over the age of 21 in 11 states, while it's legal for medical use in about 33 states, if I'm not mistaken. But its legalization prompted, of course, the creation and opening of many cannabis dispensaries and retail brands, of which the largest and most well-capitalized ones remain white-owned to this day.
Yeah.
That's according to an article on Forbes.com that I read recently. While many others, largely people of color, remain in prison for often a ridiculous amount of time, amount of years, for doing exactly what white people are doing in a legal way. You know what I mean? So I found that completely appalling, and I just do not understand the logic of it all. I just don't. Where is it? I don't find the logic here. And yeah, just to give you an example of the unfairness of it, according to an article from usatoday.com, which was published in September 2019, the tax revenue from cannabis sales of the state of Colorado in 2017 was $247 million.
Holy shit.
And meanwhile, a man called Farrell Scott has been serving a life sentence since 2008 for selling cannabis. And in this article, they said that, quote, Scott said he wasn't getting rich dealing pot, just trying to make a living for himself and his two kids. If Scott were selling large quantities of marijuana today, he might be on magazine covers hailing him as an entrepreneur. But because he was selling large quantities of marijuana a decade ago, he's a lifer, end quote.
Whoa.
All of that to say that although the legalization of cannabis is a positive change in the USA, its benefits is very unfairly distributed, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Ugh, I hate how the system manages to still profit the privileged, even when it seems like it's transforming to a better direction, right? Like legalization of weed, of course, we say. But then when we witness who profits from that change, it's also very clear that even the criminalization of it was to maintain that status quo, to get this white straight man richer and their companies by enslaved labor in prisons of incarcerated people. And I really recommend the documentary 13th by Ava DuVernay to the ones who haven't seen it yet. It's about mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex in the United States, how the 13th Amendment ensured the very ground on which new forms of enslavement could be invented over and over again, and how war on drugs systematically destroyed black communities and still does, and serves their bodies as literally enslaved labor to companies. It's disgusting. And learning more about the Harm Reduction Coalition, I recognize that their practices actually directly work toward dismantling the structures of this prison industrial complex by targeting the very notions that made war on drugs possible and widely accepted. The key principles of harm reduction from the Harm Reduction Coalition that Adrian Murray Brown mentions here does a great job in laying out the main complexities of all of this on the side of the drug user. So to summarize it, basically, the HRC accepts the reality of licit or illicit drug use instead of ignoring or condemning it, and chooses to work towards minimizing its harm. To reduce this harm, they call for non-judgmental, non-coercive provision of services and resources for individuals and their communities. And in action, this puts the drug users themselves in the position of agency and empowering them by sharing information and supporting specific strategies that can help them. And very importantly, they have a very clear sight of the root of the problem, which is, of course, by recognizing that poverty, class, racism, social isolation, past trauma, sex-based discrimination, and other inequalities and modes of violence affect people's vulnerabilities and their capacity for effectively dealing with drug-related harm. So actually, it has very little to do with that specific person, but it has everything to do with the system that person lives in. Yeah. So clear that we need to dismantle the shit out of all of this.
Oh, yeah. Holy shit, yes, absolutely. Oh, my God.
Seriously.
But I think it's such an incredible work that they're doing, because for once, somebody is on the side of the drug user rather than against them. And I don't think that's something that we see very often. Definitely not in the mainstream media, which is the media that travels the fastest and spreads the best, unfortunately. So it feels good to know that there are people out there who are doing the work to ensure that everybody is treated equally as a human being rather than by their drug use or whether or not they've been in prison or why they were in prison and such things. Yeah.
I mean, all of these systemic factors of violence is really numbing and is actually murderous even. And Brown points to this intersection of addiction, control, coping, escape, trauma, and many other experiences of harm with the pleasure of that I am alive feeling, of which millions of people are deprived. You know, and I want to quote Brown on how she described the paranoia-inspiring realities of the world we live in. Quote, "Everyone is being watched and controlled within borders they didn't determine, exchanging paper someone else told us is valuable for things of actual value, and living under a dangerous government since forever." End quote. And like...
Bam.
Girl, seriously, no wonder we are all fucked up in numerous ways, especially in your case in infinite ways. I'm kidding, it's absolutely the same for me.
Can't deny.
It's no wonder.
Nope.
It's no wonder. It's hilarious to make one person accountable for something that is obviously a creation of things that were out of their hands.
Exactly. And I think it shows the cowardice of this whole system, right? Because instead of taking responsibility and actually looking at themselves and figuring out what the problem is in the system itself, they're like, you're the problem. You have something wrong with you. You're fucking everything up in your life. Nope. Excuse me, but
really
no.
So terrible. It's a terrible display of willful ignorance.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really terrible.
They can't expect people to thrive and be self-aware and be happy and all of those things if the system itself is against them. If all of what they do is just hammering on our heads constantly and putting obstacle after obstacle on our path.
With power and privilege that we can't even imagine, that we can't even comprehend. The power and privilege of a state we're talking about.
Yep.
And states also on an international level. And we are just individuals. The fuck? Leave us alone.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And actually, I had a question for you, Mais, regarding this wonderful chapter that we started with.
Okay.
Since this is all about not only the really fucked up sides of how drugs or the system manipulates people to think that drugs are going to be the worst thing in your life, but also make sure that drugs are going to be the worst thing that to happen in your life.
That's so true. Yeah.
I was wondering, on the pleasure side of it, what are the pleasures that you actually intentionally practice to soften the physical, the emotional, and political pain of modern life, as Brown put it herself?
I think it's laughter. I try to create this environment that fills up with laughter suddenly, with like friends that I love, or my partner, or my family. It just lightens the mood up immediately.
Yeah.
It unplugs me from how serious I take life sometimes, as if everything is so serious, as if this life is permanent, as if this life is a permanent condition, and then I am doomed if I don't solve this little problem. And then I start laughing and everything gets absurd and everything is funny. Then yeah, it gives me great pleasure and really relieves a lot of pain. It softens the edges of this terrible world that is constantly trying to be taken very seriously, urgently, immediately, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You should fill your life with laughter.
Yeah. I first wanted to answer you by saying reading, which is something that makes me feel amazing. But also, I didn't know if it was a pleasure practice or if it was a coping mechanism, so I didn't say reading.
Maybe all of the
but
above.
Laughter is... Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the right answer. But laughter it is. How about you?
Yeah, actually, as a former heavy weed smoker myself, as I've mentioned a couple of minutes ago, I have to admit that I've been seriously considering consuming weed again, now that I'm in a healthier place, mentally and emotionally. I used to smoke daily in a rather large quantity between the age of, let's say, 14, 15, and 18 before I slowed down and reduced my consumption to eventually stop completely when I was 20, so 5 years ago. But funnily enough, when I stopped, and I think you already know that, it coincided with my move to the Netherlands, which people often find confusing, considering weed is tolerated by law here and sold freely in coffee shops. Come to the Netherlands if you're a weed smoker.
Yep.
But the high I used to pursue and obtain back then was rooted in what I now see as an escapism based in pain and self-harm. So I'm genuinely curious about the high I could pursue now and enjoy. I'm in such a radically different place at the moment. Not that I don't feel pain anymore or that I don't have worries, but I definitely do not want to self-harm with drugs anymore. I want to enjoy, to relish, and to let go. And it feels appealing to me again, which is nice. So I might as well. But just like you, actually, also, for now, my pleasure practices to soothe the pains of modern life are mainly laughter, of course, cooking, eating a lot of delicious foods in abundance, smoking cigarettes as well. And sometimes, I mean, now I have a workout practice as well and doing yoga. And maybe those things don't really sound like they go hand in hand. Especially under the umbrella of the hashtag wellness
Oh my
community or
God.
hashtag healthy lifestyle.
Ew.
But you know what? I don't give a fuck. I don't fucking pretend to be a quote unquote perfect human being. I love
Yes.
healthy foods as much as I love less healthy foods such as pizza. I love working out and sweating or yoga and
Yep.
meditation as much as I love laying around and watching YouTube videos.
Mm-hmm.
And I love smoking cigarettes as much as I love doing breathwork exercises for my anxiety.
Yes, that's great. That sounds like harm reduction.
See? There you
Yeah,
fucking go.
absolutely.
So yeah, I would say my pleasure practices are mainly, my goal is not to outlive everyone, but but my pleasure practices do lay in the sense of ownership that they give me over my body, my life, my lifestyle, and I do laugh a lot, just like you. I get very goofy, especially with my life partner who I live with and who I'm deeply in love with. And with him, I get to unleash a part of myself that I don't ever or rarely show to anybody else.
Yeah,
So I love that, and it's very precious to me. So I
that's
would say
beautiful.
laughter right now is the main one as well.
Amazing, Lucy. That's so wonderful. Actually, these both parts of what you just shared um, already show clearly that getting weed back into your life can be really a different experience this time around. Because it
Oh,
sounds
yeah, I
like,
think so too.
also like the attitude of Harm Reduction Coalition, they also had this system of like assessing the situation. You know how they talked about like drug set and setting, and it sounds like the mindset that you have now can bring you a total different experience with weed use
Oh, yeah.
and can be really
I would hope
wonderful.
so.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would hope so as well. I think I'm gonna try it in a few weeks and I'll see what happens and I'll
awesome.
let you know.
Give it a go. I'm curious.
Yes.
Beautiful. All right. Well, shall we move on to the next chapter?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. Well, after this wonderful intro from Adrian Murray Brown, we go on with a conversation with Monique Tula titled Conditions of Possibility. I will first read Monique's bio from harmreduction.org to introduce her to our listeners. Quote, Monique Tula, she, her, is the executive director of the National Harm Reduction Coalition. Monique has devoted her career to lifting the voices of people pushed into society's margins caused by capitalism and racial inequity. Central to her belief system is the deep awareness of our interconnectedness, regardless of individual circumstances. Her life's work is a conscious manifestation of the belief that harm to one is harm to us all. She aims to live each day in the moment, in pursuit of balance, personal growth, and discovery. Some days are harder to do this than others. Mother of Christian, grandmother of Malcolm, and life partner of Adam, she lives in Los Angeles with her family and their two agro-black cats, Necro and Manser. End quote. I love her and her cats. I love it.
I'm in love with her already.
Oh my god, Necromancer. I love that. And it's no wonder such a brilliant human is the executive director of something as awesome as Harm Reduction Coalition.
Definitely.
So wonderful. But I have to make another definition because what is Harm Reduction Coalition? Monique describes it as such, quote, it is a social justice movement built on the belief in and respect for the rights of people who use drugs. Harm reduction combines two key strategies: public health strategies to reduce harms associated with substance use, and advocacy and drug policy reform to address harms caused to communities by the war on drugs. Our bottom line is that everyone has the right to health and well-being, and everyone has the right to participate in the public policy dialogue. End quote. And it was formed by a small group of awesome visionaries who were fueled by the impact of the HIV/AIDS crisis and the war on drugs, with the aim of keeping themselves safe. They were active or former drug users, people of color, LGBTQ+ activists, and veterans of social justice movements. That's what it is. Harm Reduction
Yeah.
Coalition. What a brilliant
Wonderful.
existence on the face of this many times terrible earth, right? I just love that it exists. I love all these people. That's so beautiful.
I love that too. It's I think it's a movement that really needs to be talked about more, and such organizations don't get enough credit for the work that they do, I believe, and definitely not enough spotlight.
Absolutely. Well, Monique talks about how people who use drugs are among the most stigmatized and criminalized groups in society. And then they are also then treated so harshly. Like, it's your fault that you got HIV or hepatitis. Your fault that you lack, whatever it is that you missed that made you bring this to yourself. And this is such a cruel perception, and it's also downright ignorant because so much of who we are and what we are is shaped by incredibly violent systems of oppression, like we just mentioned, like racialization and sex or gender-based discrimination. So these kind of accusations to me seems like it stem from a place of lack of understanding of privilege and how it works and its nuances. I feel like we could really all just benefit from a privilege workshop kind of a thing in education to make us acknowledge all kinds of privileges that we have, maybe not even aware of that we have it, and to relate it to our surroundings. It could bring so much compassion.
Holy shit, yes, that is actually such a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Wow.
Imagine if we could sit in a classroom with a group of people and first count our own privileges. I have this privilege, that one. And then kindly tell each other the ones that we observe that, or offer that they might consider that they might have it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and then create
definitely.
this discussion around that. Oh my God.
It should be.
That's so exciting.
It should be a mandatory exercise, a mandatory class.
So true.
At a young age too, I think. Of course, it would take different forms depending on how old the students are, but I think it should be, I don't know, maybe not every day, but like every week or every month or every year at least.
Yeah, I feel like it would be such a practice that would change everything because it would probably push people or invite people, let's say, to be much kinder to each other. And by extent, it would also make all of us convinced that these pain that other people suffer shouldn't exist. So everyone would have this inner conviction that there's something wrong with these systems and we need to change that, right?
Yeah.
Even the most privileged would see that the person who's sharing that classroom with them is suffering a certain lack of privilege.
That's so true. Yeah, fuck yeah.
How can you try not to see that? How can you, no, it would be amazing.
I believe so. So.
Well, Monique gives us some other reasons why one might be using drugs. I really liked that because she proposes this approach of what if, right? This question of what if. And she says, quote, "What if someone is using as an attempt to mitigate the stress and impact of previous or concomitant trauma or mental health issues? What if someone comes from a community of people who use, and thus drug use is a cultural norm? What if drug use is a part of a spiritual practice? What if drug use is a way to tap into an inner creative self? What if a person uses drugs because they get great pleasure in doing so?" End quote. And yeah, absolutely.
Facts.
Such a good question to confront prejudice with, right?
Fucking facts.
Yeah, exactly. What if is such a good question. What if?
Yeah, it's not just one reason. It's not the same for everybody. And I think, just like Monique says herself, no one should be punished for what they put in their own body if it doesn't cause harm to other people. And
so true.
The reason behind the drug use shouldn't be like a fucking sign on their heads to say they're a bad person no matter what.
Yeah.
Like, no, fuck off.
For sure. So true. I mean, also in this chapter, Monique gives us a picture that really helps making sense of all the complexities of it, because she shares with us her own experience and lineage related to drug use in such a beautiful and touching way.
Yeah.
I loved her story.
I loved it too.
I loved the story that she shared with us. Her grandmother, Mary Ellen, experienced what I understood as a medical violation, most probably a racist medical violation, when her tubes were tied without her consent. And she spent her entire life wondering why she couldn't bear more children, and drinking every day perhaps to cope with the immense pain she felt about this. And of course this trauma was generational. It came before Mary Ellen, and it passed on to Monique's father, Darrell Lee, who had to live with his aunt Mabel until he was 16, not knowing why he wasn't raised by his mother. And of course, then he also experienced depression and anxiety without any help, totally alone and isolated. He then used heroin, which inevitably caused more money problems, arrests, and bids in the penitentiary. Monique also thinks that he never really forgave himself for what he saw as his failings, but she eventually came to see them as inevitabilities caused by the systems of poverty, generational, societal, and institutional trauma, untreated mental health problems, and more. It's such a clear picture of why these things happen and how they're generational, how they destroy lives of people for multiple generations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found Monique's personal family history with drug super fascinating, because I think that when hearing such an intense drug use history in one family, we might believe that it would completely turn off someone to drugs altogether and leave a really painful scar behind. However, it feels like Monique's perspective is really refreshing. It's really open. She saw family members suffer through drug use, but she also saw some of them thrive and deeply have fun with it. And she acknowledges that drug use can cause harm, but said harm can happen primarily because the system itself doesn't support drug users in any way, and it pushes them further into that dark place, right? I love that she's advocating for drug users nowadays and trying to create a safe, supportive place for them with a very supportive team of people behind them, guiding them, walking alongside them, instead of taking, I think, the most common route of going completely against it and trying to eradicate it in a violent way.
Yeah, that's very true. I find Monique's approach very inspiring, and I think it ends with her. You know, this generational trauma ends with her now.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too.
I hope this ends with her, and after her or with her, that it can't survive sucking all the terrible, negative, violent nutrition it feeds on. This trauma, I mean. And she is doing that healing work for herself and for other people.
Yeah.
And I find that so inspiring and so it touches me greatly. And I also really want to highlight here that she said, despite all these hardships that she mentioned, their life wasn't all doom and gloom. They persevered, kept laughter with them. At home it was fun a lot of times, just dancing, singing, kicking it up. And I want to highlight that and really appreciate that, how they persevered in the face of racialized criminalization of drug use and literal states putting all their apparatus against them, seriously. And them surviving it with laughing and dancing and singing. I love that.
That's empowering. That's
so
beautiful.
And also, what do you think about this so-called bohemian club? This club that was until recently a men-only club near Sonoma, California, whose motto used to be "Spiders weave not thy web here," referring to women. Like, don't weave your web here. Like, where do I even begin my puking frenzy about these people? I feel a barf exploding when I think about these kind of people.
I am so disgusted by them. The fact that this is a real thing, that this club was created by real people, and that they came up with that bullshit motto. What the fuck?
I know. And
what the actual fuck?
Powerful people. These are politicians, university presidents, oil tycoons, rich white men who believe that they own the world. Ew. Oh my god.
It's truly
it's
disgusting.
So
it's so when I read that, it gave me chills, but not the good kind of chills. I was like, this is so creepy. This is so
Bohemian Club.
Fuck off.
You know what I think? I think we should create a new travel magazine and put the worst places to be in on Earth. And I think Bohemian Club probably would have ranked within the first 10. These misogynistic, delusional, pathetic boys and that stupid club they created.
Yeah, this is what hell looks like, literally.
Yeah. You would know.
Oh yeah, I do.
But I just mentioned that because Monique's vision for the impact of harm reduction
Yes.
is she wants to see a world full of those spiders, weaving their webs everywhere, creating an interconnected world, resisting and even dismantling all forms of supremacy.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah. Honestly, it gave me the most amazing heart vibrations when I read that. It was so beautiful to read, and I am so happy that she exists.
Same.
That she's out there, that she has those true anchored beliefs and values that she's spreading all around her. I find it so beautiful. And actually, when I read her kind of counteract to the Bohemian Club, I was like, I want to get a fucking spider tattoo. I'm a fucking spider bitch.
Beautiful.
You are not ready for my webs.
I love that. That's a good idea.
This should be a secret sign, a secret symbol for all of us fucking
Spiders.
men destroying spiders.
Wow, I love that. I had a very interesting take from this text as well. I loved it how she said, "We take pleasure in treating people kindly." End quote. And this is just another wonderful form of pleasure we came across in this book.
That's true.
And I was like, isn't it true? Isn't treating people kindly so pleasurable?
It really is.
It's so fucking cool. I love it. I love treating people kindly. Kind people are the absolute best. I want to be surrounded by kindness at all times.
Me too. Me too. And it was such a good reminder because we don't I think it's also something that we don't necessarily think about when we think about pleasure, being kind to people, because it sounds so I don't know, like such a detail in our lives, treating people kindly. That's something that you hopefully learn from a young age, but it's actually such an immense source of pleasure. If you treat people kindly, you are putting out an energy that is so different in all kinds of vibrations out in the world, and it's gonna come back to you, I believe.
I agree fully. Being kind to people only has been good to me, nothing else. I have endless capacity for kindness, and I believe in people's endless capacity for kindness as well. Many people do have that, and that's what I want to feel surrounding me. And kindness really has been the utmost important character I paid attention to when making friends the past 4 years or so. Like, I love you also for many reasons, but also because you are kind as fuck. You're so kind.
Thank you.
You are literally like those rare gems among the Rietveld Academy students who aren't too cool to be kind. I'm sorry.
The shade.
But these are facts. No tea, no shade.
All tea, all shade.
I know. Don't even get me started on Rietveld student culture and how people communicate with each other. Don't. I honestly don't remember anywhere else in my adult life where it felt like kindness was uncool.
That is so fucking true. Oh my god, you just made me realize something. Wow, that is so true. I had this experience as well, but at some point I just thought it was normal and that I was the weird one. You know?
Oh yeah, I felt that too. That's why I got together with other kind weirdos like you and some others, you know? Okay, back to the text.
Yes.
I also want to highlight the harm reduction method that I mentioned earlier as well, when you mentioned how you would like to try having weed in your life again. Because that approach really is amazing to understand the complexity of drug use. They call it drug, set, and setting. So it's looking at the type of drug that is used, their mindset, the user's mindset, and health at that moment, and the environment in which the use takes place. And this information forms the life-affirming strategy to approach the drug use and ensuring dignity and agency to people who use it. I really love that. And I love how Monique suggests that we can use this approach to many things that we practice in life. What is it that we do? What is the mindset that we're in doing it? And what is the setting, the environment, the situation? being like the literal environment, but also people who create that environment as such, and the dynamics.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
So good, such a good method, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, it sounds almost foolproof, you know.
So true. Well, Lucy, I want to end this specific chapter with a quote from Monique. Quote, "We create the space to love ourselves. And if that isn't pleasure activism, I don't know what is." End quote. Another great definition for pleasure activism, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love that quote.
It is really the practice of creating the space to love ourselves and each other in the best way possible.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Beauty.
Thanks for listening so far. We will take a short break and we'll be with you in a second. Alright, next up we have an incredible text by Malachi Garza titled "Experiments in Cannabis for the Collective." I will again start by introducing Malachi from their bio on southturners-on-newground.org. Malachi Garza is a director of the Community Justice Network for Youth, a national network of over 200 organizations working to eliminate racial and ethnic disparities within the criminal and juvenile justice systems and build localized community alternatives to these systems. Malachi is the current co-chair, the Youth and Community Organizing Table of Obama's My Brother's Keeper initiative. Malachi also serves on the board of directors of the School of Unity and Liberation, the Transgender and Intersex Justice Project, and the Brown Boy Project. Malachi serves Southerners on New Ground through a board appointment as a national strategist. Malachi co-founded the Brown Boy Project in 2009 and received the 2015 Voto Latino Innovators Award. Malachi has been working 24/7 to build a liberation-focused movement for the past 17 years and believes that we will win. So basically just another legend from this book.
Fucking icon.
The text is incredible, super informative and empowering, and it starts by immediately serving some bitter hot tea. Quote, "The less one has, the less one has to do to get incarcerated."
Heartbreaking but true.
Yeah, it is the truth. I mean, Malachi grew up in the 80s in the US, a life experience of witnessing the war on drugs and the ruthless targeting of the communities of color and people living in poverty, the racial criminalization shaping the fabric of their lives.
Yeah.
I love Malachi's embodiment of action, saying, quote, "We are all responsible to find a way, a moment, an opening, or a set of relationships that allow us to grow as interrupters of despair." End quote.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? I agree with it.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I think it's a mic drop. I think it should be written in really big fat letters above everyone's house.
Yeah. I mean, I do claim this responsibility for myself, and I do agree that we all share a certain responsibility for that, to interrupt despair. But there might be other people who don't feel like they have this responsibility.
No,
That's
of course.
fine. It's everyone's life for themselves. But yeah, I really agree with that. It's a beautiful statement.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
a statement that invites us to come forward, to stop the suffering some others are experiencing.
It's really motivating too. Yeah.
It's wonderful. Malachi's work has a long history of looking for experiment in reparations, building real, stabilizing, intergenerational wealth. Reparations for generations of enslaved labor, violence and oppression, and of course, reparations for the war on drugs and the communities it impacted. One of the ways to achieve this might be through the growing industry of marijuana.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that what Malachi is doing right now is really fucking badass. One of the things being using the cannabis industry and its minority-owned businesses to help rehabilitate formerly incarcerated people, particularly those with drug offenses. I think it's just a massively genius approach and such a brilliant, actionable plan.
Yeah.
And I believe it will work. I really believe it can work. And creating opportunities and growing, expanding this industry with and for people of color and former quote-unquote drug offenders. I don't like this term, but you know what I mean, is truly, truly brilliant, I believe.
I totally agree with you. And it's a very smart move, a very smart observation of what's happening right now. Malachi says, quote, as marijuana legalization spreads across the United States, the accompanying marijuana industry is projected to grow to $44 billion by the year 2020, end quote. So, of course, many white straight men of Silicon Valley quit their tech jobs and jumped on the wagon of cannabis business. And their power, their privilege and money enables them to benefit from the efforts of activists who seek to legalize weed, whose efforts are rooted in the impacts of the war on drugs, who primarily seek liberation and reparations. But those white, straight Silicon Valley men don't even acknowledge this fight for justice. They don't care.
Nope.
They don't care. They just want to jump on and get a piece of that billion.
Yep.
And the criminalization and state-inflicted poverty of black and brown bodies keep them disadvantaged in this growing industry also. It keeps them out of that competition. Malachi says that there's only 1% African-American ownership across the entire industry.
Yeah.
I know that wealthy black people like Jay-Z is among them, for example. I think he has a cannabis brand that is active right now. Malachi also mentions other owners that function as a queer feminist POC business collective, supporting local business and giving back to their communities. They hire formerly incarcerated people, especially those with drug offenses, quote unquote, with good pay and benefits. And they also think about other methods of help, like sending a percentage of their profits to a fund supporting formerly incarcerated people. I find all the ideas Malachi mentioned in this text extremely exciting. There's definitely an incredible opportunity of transforming oppressed communities, criminalized communities, giving them wealth and resources through the growing industry of cannabis. I love the idea of communities of black and brown people making incredible wealth by the very industry that waged war against them for decades.
It's absolute pure up top genius, honestly, because it's not only really clever and really smart and really attentive, but it's just also so mindful and so nurturing too, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I just find it, I find this intention and this action and this whole process and end goal to be really valuable and really important to put forward.
Yeah. And all of this also highlighted for me another thing, that reparations are taken, not given, right? It would be delusional and naive to think that a state would ever endorse any kind of satisfactory reparation. They won't. That's just not the nature of states. Their nature is violence. And seems like it will be always have to be wonderful organizers and movements who will have to find smart ways of pushing back all these systems of oppression and transforming the conditions and taking what's their right to have. Reparations will have to be taken, not given. It won't be given. It won't be given. Never.
No, never. Unfortunately.
No state will give it. No.
Sadly so.
Bad. Yeah.
Yeah, sadly we're not at that point yet. Hopefully in the future we will get there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, do you have any other additions for this one?
No, I don't think so. I think we went over everything I had written down.
Okay, all right. Well, the last text of this episode is from Adrienne Marie Brown herself, titled Ecstasy Saved My Life, where she talks about her relationship with ecstasy in great honesty and transparency.
Yeah.
The first time she took one, she thought that maybe sex was supposed to feel like this, but that she hadn't met the level of lover yet. That level of lover. It became a medicine to her. She described a beautiful time that looked very beautiful on surface level.
Yeah, she did. Yeah. But of course, there's a quote-unquote downside to it, which I also really love how honest she was about her whole experience. And I strongly felt every single word that Adrienne Marie Brown spoke in this essay.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, her personal experience of ecstasy is honestly quite close to mine, to what I went through too. So I really could relate to what she was saying, and I found it really spot on and beautifully authentic.
I agree fully. She painted a great picture for us, that carried all of the emotional complexities of that experience.
Mm-hmm.
She had a community back then. They went through this time together, and she describes it so sweetly. She says, quote, "We had jobs, we had oppressions, but the center of our lives was pleasure, celebration, dancing, music, cooking together, sharing a critique of our country, seeking freedom in the here and now." End quote. And I also love how her friend grabbed her face and told her that she was beautiful over and over again until she believed it. I think there was a lot of beauty with those people around that time.
So sweet.
Yeah,
it went
so
right
sweet.
through my heart.
So sweet. I can't. Brown later says that there was this downside, that she was actually depressed. She describes it as such, quote, "That's one of the things you can call it when someone needs pills in order to access their natural magic, interconnectedness, and pleasure. There was unnamed sexual trauma, unspoken abuse, fat phobia, depressive tendencies, and perfectionism challenged by having failed to graduate college. I felt like a fraud all the time. I had anxiety, I had paranoia, I was scared of everything and everyone." End quote. I love her so much. I empathize with so much of her experience as well, just like you do. And I love how she shared this very human time in her life, this very deeply human experience with all the perceived flaws of it.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Very human and very humbling too, in a lot of ways, I think. Because, I don't know, I feel like in my personal experience, when you go through something like this, you might believe that you're the only one to feel this way and that nobody can understand you. So reading her own experience is humbling in the sense that you don't feel like you're the only one ever to have felt that. And it's incredibly reassuring and incredibly humbling because it reminds you of how connected we all are and how similar our experiences can be.
Yeah. And she also went through that depression with the patches of light ecstasy gave her. But then she later found somatics, authentic relationships, body work, and an amazing therapist. So she began to really feel more and more, which enabled to see her previous numbness in retrospect. But those patches of light lit the way to her growth. So ecstasy really helped her. Indeed, ecstasy saved her life back then in that case.
Yeah. I love that this is how she puts it, the patches of light.
Yeah.
I just love that she calls it that. Those moments in her life when she was experiencing these very high highs and these very low lows because of this specific drug.
That's very true, because even if that particular interconnectedness that she was experiencing was induced by the drug, it still was there. There was interconnectedness. When she couldn't generate that herself.
It was real.
Because of the depression that she was going through.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think there's anything wrong in getting a little help, a little kick when you need it, you know? Just like she did, just like a lot of us do. A lot of us did probably too, and a lot of us will still in down the road, you know?
Yep. Oh, I absolutely love Adrienne Maree Brown.
Yeah, I love Adrienne Maree Brown too, and I found this essay to be absolutely wonderful. It reminded me of so many of my experiences, of my emotions, of the way that I look back on my my life back when I was using drugs. And yeah, it was a bit of a reminiscing, nostalgic feeling reading through it. Yeah, because honestly, MDMA, which is a drug, kids, in case you didn't know. The drug that Adrienne Maree Brown talks about, actually, it made me feel things that I didn't think were possible back in the day. It made me enjoy in a way I wasn't even aware could exist. I remember using MDMA on a regular basis when I was 17, 18, whenever I went to clubs. R.I.P. club life, by the way.
Yes.
Whenever I went to clubs with my friends, because it gave me a kind of energy that I had never felt before, and it made music feel like a river
Ooh,
of
yeah.
pleasure going through my entire
Mm.
body. Seriously, I remember the first time I took MDMA, that one tiny pill of powder in, in a cigarette rolling paper. We used to call it a parachute. I don't know if it's the same term in English, whatever. But the first time I took it, it was the most incredible feeling. Oh my God. And the way I danced felt so incredibly good and fulfilling. Oh, it felt freeing, you know? It felt shameless. It felt empowering. The way I moved in the world, the way I walked home at nights became a completely different kind of
Yeah.
adventure, an adventure in itself. And I felt so sexy as well. And don't get me wrong, because I do feel sexy when I'm sober as
Mm-hmm,
well,
mm-hmm.
obviously.
As you should.
Thank you. But it's hard to explain the difference with the kind of sexy I felt when I was on MDMA. It was just different.
That sounds beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, but of course, just like Adrienne Murray Brown, I also used MDMA as a band-aid of light in my
Yeah.
case to cover
Mm-hmm.
up or maybe enlighten my darker and unhealed wounds. But I don't regret that either. I was able to
Yeah.
stop when I needed to,
Mm-hmm.
because I do have addictive tendencies, but I was able to stop, and that's a good thing. I'm not against MDMA at all. I'm not saying I would never take it again. But maybe just like Adrienne Murray Brown, I would use it with I would use it with light this time and not with
Yeah.
darkness.
Yeah. 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 Beautiful. I mean, maybe that's also something you can get back to,
Yeah.
at least to try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. I would
To see how it feels this time.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very curious about that, and the difference would probably also be that now I wouldn't take MDMA as often as I did back in the
Mm-hmm.
days, because it was a
Mm-hmm.
lot. Oh my God, it was so much. But occasionally, why the fuck not, you know?
Yeah, very true. The first time I took it was in Istanbul,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know what the fuck it was that I took. It was supposed to be ecstasy. But alright, well, I danced, I don't know, whatever. It wasn't very special at that moment. But then I took MDMA with my partner in a very intimate way. And I felt all of these wonderful things you just mentioned.
Ooh.
Like this connectedness, this sensuality, this being in love with my body. But it was also not in a club. We were just in our living room and just intimately just talking or just being together. And I felt that time, I guess for the first time, like that I was really forgiving myself or something.
Whoa.
I don't know for what, but it felt like I was forgiving myself in a way.
Wow.
So that's what I took from that experience back then. And that felt beautiful.
That is amazing.
I know. It was really amazing.
This is so
Seriously.
fascinating.
Yeah, it
Wow.
was beautiful.
Have you ever had other experiences on drugs or maybe on certain substances where you had um, a similar feeling of or a wave of emotion that branches out from the same as you described just now?
Not really.
Like a wave of forgiveness or a wave of hashtag realizing things.
Yeah. No, I think it was just that time of taking pure MDMA, not ecstasy. I guess they're different in some ways, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it was pure MDMA what we had with my partner, and it was that experience that was amazing. But with other stuff, many of which I don't endorse this behavior that I didn't really know what it was that I took in clubs with friends, whatever. Okay, everyone was a teenager, okay?
You don't have to justify yourself to us, honey.
I know. You're right. Um, But yeah, back then, yeah, that was just fun. That was just dancing.
No, but that's interesting.
But it wasn't really a spiritual awakening.
Yeah, it's interesting that you did have some kind of spiritual awakening on MDMA with your partner. I find that so beautiful because it can happen. It doesn't always happen, of course. It really depends on a lot of factors. I can't name them all, and it really depends on the individual. But I really find it fascinating how our brain works and reacts on drugs. Like you had this spiritual awakening on MDMA in this intimate environment, in this cocoon of high with someone that you love. And it's so mysterious, isn't it? How drugs can affect our whole being, not only by making us high, but also revealing things to us.
That's very true.
Unveiling
Taking
things.
us to a state that we can't go to when we are not under influence of them.
But drugs are, or what we call drugs in the Western world at least, have always been part of human life and the human experience. In many different cultures, they're used as medicinal, spiritual tools to connect with what we would call the afterlife, with spirits, with ghosts, with ancestors, with aliens, with all of that whole universe that we would tend to call woo-woo, you know. But it's actually a very culturally anchored thing, and it's something that people truly believe in its powers. And I just find that so interesting. I could talk about drugs all day.
I find that very interesting too, the history of it as well, the history of its uses too, you know?
Yeah.
Like before an era of colonization and Western dominance on Earth.
Yeah.
That's definitely very interesting.
Yeah.
How they approached it, how they used it. Ceremonial, medicinal.
Yeah, ritualistic.
Not to create an enslaved labor. Come on.
No, exactly.
Oh my God.
We should go back to that.
The white world is sick. Whiteness is a sick identity.
Oh, it is so gross.
Every white person needs to remember that before they were whiteified, before they were white, they were humans. And then this terrible fictional identity of whiteness was thrust upon them.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of the color of their skin. And then I love how Trisha Hersey of the NEP ministry says white people have their own stuff to deal with. They have their own shit they need to deal with. Like this generational oppression that their lineage caused on other people. The toxicity that it left on them.
Yeah, that's true.
You know? They have to deal with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, wow, bitch. It's been something.
Yes, definitely.
Well, maybe then that's how we wrap this episode, Lucy. Well, thank you so much to all our listeners, and thank you, my dearest Lucy, for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun, and I loved all of the conversations that we had together. These were incredible chapters with incredible people writing and sharing with us their own experience. I hope our audience appreciated it as much as we did. And yeah, it was fun as per usual.
Exactly. It was also a hefty one, but I loved going through it with you.
Yeah.
It was really enjoyable to discuss these things that were at times a bit distressing. But I hope our listeners enjoyed it as well.
Of course.
And I'm already looking forward to our next one. Okay.
Yes.
We'll meet you later.
Thank you. See
Bye
you
bye.
next Sunday.
Yes. Bye. Our music is by the amazing Patrick Valinga, and our graphic design is by the wonderful Yuri Sato.